Thank you for accepting my invitation and accepting to talk with me.
Oh, my pleasure. It's very kind of you to ask. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. How are you?
I'm hot. It's very hot here tonight. It's nearly 10. It's after 10 o'clock and it's still 28 degrees.
28 degrees. Okay. You live in
Australia, Sydney.
Australia. Okay.
It's
Nice.
it's coming into summer. Still
Okay.
spring. So if this is going to be the rest of our year, it's going to be hot.
Okay. So, can you put your camera a little downwards so that people who watches our video can see you clearly? Yeah.
You need me to turn it up, turn it around
No, no. Now it is good.
like that.
Now it's fine.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So I thought to introduce you to my audience.
Sorry.
I thought to introduce you to my audience.
Oh, thank you. I'd love to meet your audience.
So can you introduce yourself to my audience?
Yeah, my name's Clyve Rose. I write historical fiction set in the Regency era. I write romances, so everyone gets a happy ending. And I love it. I love everything about it. I love the research. I love the words, the old-fashioned words. I love the horses, the carriages, the fact that no one has a mobile phone. Uh, it's a lot of fun to go into a different time and enjoy that. I also have a passion for swords and dragons and all of that as well, but I haven't written anything like that for a long time. But I like that too.
Historical fiction. What it mean?
That's stories set in a different time. So the ones I write are set in the Regency era in England, about the same time as Jane Austen's novels. But I like to look at who else was there because England wasn't as small a world as it seems from her books. So in my novel, the one that was released in September, the main character is a Romany woman, a gypsy, and her culture is very different. But her people have been in England for a very, very long time, and they don't get that story doesn't get told very much. So I wanted to write about that. That's what I wrote about.
So it is just your interpretation about what happened at that particular time.
Yeah, because there was a lot more going on there than we see from the books that we're used to. There were more people there with more stories. My background is Russian. My family come from all over the place: Russian, German, Lithuanian, Balkan, and I was born in Africa, so we're all over the place. And now we're in Australia, but we're Jewish, and there were Jews there too. They don't show up in any of the stories, and I wanted to write about that. I wanted to write about who else was there, who we don't get to hear about very much. Um,
So you do research for this?
I do. I do a lot of research. The research is fun for me. I find a little fact and I think, oh, I need to know more about this. I need to know when, how, what would be different, what were they eating? Because we all know what Jane Austen's people ate. We know what the Pride and Prejudice people ate. What did everyone else eat who wasn't English living in a manor house with loads of servants? What were the other people doing? And that's what I'm interested in because everyone has a story, at least one. There's so much more going on than the narrow way we've been taught, I think. And I'd like to look more broadly.
So the book that you have released
Yeah.
in which year
Uh,
the
it's set
story was
it's
happened?
set in 1814.
Okay.
So just before the end of the Napoleonic Wars, there was a
Can
lot
you
going on in France and Europe. There was a fair bit going on in England. There was a lot going on in America. And the country I live in now had barely even begun its journey to nationhood, although there were people here too before England settled in Australia. And there are stories about that as well that we're only sort of learning to look at now. history is changing. The way people describe history is changing.
Okay.
And you're in India, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a difference between the way the history is told in India and the way it's told in England about India.
Okay.
And that's interesting. And, it's about time that everyone got to tell their stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of just, we're English, we conquered it, it's ours. I was born in Africa in a small colony, and there were a lot more people there than just the British. So
It's
those are the stories I'm interested in, because I think the general story, the ones everyone knows, I think they've been told time for
so.
other people.
So this is the story which you just imagined that was happened in 18th century.
1814, yes. Yeah. It's it's got quite a bit going on. It's a love story between an English army officer who's also the son of a duke and a gypsy girl, a Romany girl. I prefer to use the term Romany, even though in that time they probably wouldn't have used it. Some people from that culture think gypsy is insult, so I prefer not to use that word if it harms them. And I have some of that culture in my family too, just not from England. More Russian, but I got interested. They now know that the Romani people actually originated in India before they got to Europe. So that was interesting to me as well. And some of the traditions are a little bit similar. Some of the language, some of the words, very similar. And they are still treated very badly in Europe, because their culture is so different and their values are so different, and they don't have a lot of control over the world they live in and the laws they live under.
Okay.
So how they've survived for so long and preserved their culture and their traditions, it's pretty amazing. Yeah. And I wanted to look at how they dress differently and what was okay for their people and not okay for the British. And there's a lot of distrust. So I wanted to write that in the romance genre with my hero and my heroine, and have them have the happy ending by learning that there's more important things than just following the rules. So I think we're all learning that now.
So in this book, people can find the societal rules and
Yeah, it's called Always a Princess. Can you see?
yeah, always princess.
Always a Princess, and it's on Amazon.
Okay.
If you want Kindle or paperback, you can get it from Amazon. Otherwise, there's another link that I gave you for Barnes and Noble and Kobo and PDF format. So it's available as ebook and paperback.
So while doing research, I'm sure you'll be collecting information through different sources.
Yes, that's right. I do loads of research. For this book, what started the character of the female character in my head, I found a old manuscript from the 1800s with Romani language and English language. It was like a little dictionary. It wasn't completed and it was very old and a bit out of date, but it inspired me to learn more. And so I just kept researching, and I was working with a Romani lady at the time who was about to get married. And so I was
Okay.
learning a lot about her culture, because all she talked about, like most people who are about to get married, all she talked about at work was her wedding. So I learned so much from her, and she was just lovely. And I was lucky enough to go to her wedding, and that was beautiful and romantic. And so I couldn't get enough of learning about the traditions and the world within a world. And that was inspiring to me. And then knowing that some of my own history was caught up in that as well.
So you mixed all the three genres like history and fiction and romantic. So
Yes,
you mixed all the three and
yes. If it didn't have a happy ending and it was based on a very historical moment, and I am working on something that isn't a romance but is historical. For it to be a romance, it has to end happily. But a lot of real life historical stories don't have happy endings.
Yeah.
You know, if you were writing the story of one of Henry VIII's wives, you probably wouldn't have a happy ending. They all either died or lost their heads. So that would be historical fiction. But for it to be a romance, a historical romance, it needs to be set prior to 1950, and it does have to have, all romance novels have to have a happy ending. So, and I like that. I like giving all my characters, all the good guys, because in my book there's also a bit of a bad guy. But I like to give the good guys their happy moment. I've not been lucky in love myself, so I like to write lots of happy ever afters for my characters. It gives me
So
hope.
nice. So who narrates this story as an author, you or the character?
Sorry,
Who narrates the story? Who narrates
who
the story?
managed it?
Who narrates
Oh, who
narration?
narrates it? It's told through most of it's through the heroine's point of view, but also we get some of the heroes. It's not first person, and I try to keep my nose out of it. But of course, I know what's happening through the whole story. Romance novels are usually told in alternating points of view between the hero and the heroine. And I like to give at least one of the characters a little more than the other. And in this one, it's the woman. It's usually the woman for me, but not always. And I actually have another one coming out next week for Christmas. That's a shorter one. It's a novella. It's set in Paris during just after the counter-revolution, also in 1814. But it's set in Paris during the main character is an artist. So that was fun to learn about.
So how many books you have published?
As of the one coming out next week, that will be 2, and I've got 3 coming out next year. So there's
Okay.
a bit on. There's a lot on, but I can get a lot of books out of one chunk of research. I've got Always a Princess is the first. You can read it on its own, but there are 2 more books coming after that with the same characters, so it's a trilogy. It all came out of the same chunk of research.
Okay.
So it was a lot of fun to learn how to dye a horse. And to learn how long it would take someone to travel from London to Lancashire by carriage, by horse, and what kind of carriage and how many horses are pulling the carriage, and would it take you a week? Would it take you 2? How were the roads? What time of year? It's all very interesting in a world where we just get in our cars and run up the motorway. Very, very different. And in those days, you had to stop and rest your horses. You don't have that problem now. So I find all that very interesting. And I'm very fussy about it. I spent 2 days researching how long it would take to get from Paris to Vienna in 1814 in December in a snowy weather, and then I cut the whole thing later on. I'm like, well, that's lovely that I know that, but I don't need it. So that was 2 days of my life I'll never get back. It's all part of the joy.
How much time you took to write this book?
Sorry.
How much time you took for the research and to write this book?
For this one, about the first one took about a year. The second one took about half that, and the third one will probably take me 3 to 4 months. I haven't
Okay.
finished that one yet. The second one is finished. It's being edited now.
Are you a full-time writer?
Sorry?
Are you a full-time writer?
Yes.
Okay. So only historical fiction or any other
Um,
genres?
I also write uh, a, a little bit of fantasy, mythology fantasy, Greek gods, swords, magic, that sort of thing. I haven't done that this year because I've been too busy with the historical fiction, the historical romance fiction, but I plan to do a little of it next year. And I am looking at, I wrote about a small graphic novel set in the world of the Greek gods, and that's being looked at the moment, but I don't know if it's actually going to happen or not. Certainly, I won't have time to work on it between now and the end of next year, so we'll see. I
Do you
like
read?
graphic novels as a medium, which is a very exciting, very interesting.
Do you read Indian history?
Do I read
Indian history?
a little bit? Yes, I'd like to learn more. I'd like to learn more. I tend to pick a place and an era and dive in. I spend about a year just researching and reading everything I can get my hands on, and then seeing what comes to me in terms of story. I am very conscious, though, not to appropriate other people's cultures in a disrespectful way, and I think that's very important. I don't like it when people do that with Jewish culture. I hesitate to say Australian culture because I don't know. I don't know what would be considered Australian culture, but there's a lot in Indian history to work with. You've got a very, very old country with hundreds, thousands. How old? It must be thousands. Must be thousands of years of history to work with. So that's quite exciting. That said, there are a lot of wonderful writers. One of the first fiction books I ever read in school was by Bharati Mukherjee, and it was amazingly well written, and it was an eye opener for me as a very young. I wasn't even thinking about writing, but it was one of the books I read that inspired me to try writing. So I will always be grateful for that. I'll never forget that book. It was wonderful. It was called Wife. I actually think she lives in Canada now, but it was definitely set in India. It was about a woman who got married and went to live in America, and the changes that happened when she moved out of her culture to the Western world, and how hard that was on her and her marriage. It was a very interesting book, and it was so well written. But there's also a lot of wonderful richness to Indian history that I think would be terrific. But I think that's covered so well by so many of Indian writers. I wouldn't want to do that wrong. You know what I mean? I think that would be disrespectful.
So you read Indian mythology?
Yes, I find it very interesting, very fascinating. I think, and the art itself. I'm not a visual person, but I find the art very evocative and very beautiful. There's nothing like it in my world. Nothing like the beautiful. And there's such a openness about men and women and love. It's something the Western world actually almost pretends doesn't happen, which is rather sad, really. I'm just going by what I've read and seen, and it's an entirely different. There's a much stronger emphasis on togetherness and family, and not in the same way that it's done in the Western world. It just seems warmer somehow. Although, mind you, everything seems warm to me right now. Yeah, very hot. But the whole feeling I get from reading the mythological texts and looking at the artworks that go with them is warmth and togetherness and a big emphasis on feelings and love and emotional well-being, which I think the Western world tries very hard to run away from, which is very sad. Parts of it come back, but I don't know. I would love to. I've never been to India. That's one of my bucket list places, but it's a very big place, of course. I have to pick very specific. I'm trying to go to one amazing place every year. Last year it was Lapland. This year was going to be either India or Vietnam, but COVID, so maybe next year. How are you guys all going there with, are you had restrictions or lockdown or anything?
No, there's no lockdown, but people still have to wear mask and use sanitizer. but the cases are still increasing. Maybe people are thinking that government will take the decision about lockdown in December again.
And is it Diwali there at the moment?
Yeah, yeah.
Happy Diwali Day. I wasn't sure, but my daughter's school has a Diwali Day every year, and we love it. But this year, um, I I wasn't sure. I thought, is it on? That they didn't have the event, so I lost track of when it was. Every year, I go and celebrate with my Indian friends, and I get a little tattoo. Lasts about 6 weeks. It's great fun. And my daughter goes and does all the dancing. She loves it. Wonderful. And it's not a school event, but nearly everyone from her school comes, and so the kids have a great time.
So you read Ramayana and Mahabharata and any Indian mythology or any Indian historical stories?
I have done, and there's some wonderful romance writers who write very, very culturally focused romance, which I find lovely. There was another, I've forgotten the name of it. I will have to try to find it, and I'll drop it into the chat for you. Um, and all her books were named after spices, which I thought was quite a clever way to do it. There was one, the one I read was called uh, Chai and Prejudice, and it was great. And it was Regency, and it was it was great. I thought this is terrific. Again, a perspective that you don't always get. What was going on in India during while England was busy dancing at their balls and bowing to their mad king and all that. What was going on in India, where England was making itself wealthy and all of that. So it was, yeah, Chai and Prejudice. It was a great book. I recommend it. I've not been as good with my reading recently as I usually am, because I find it very difficult to read while I'm in the middle of writing. And I've literally just sent the final edits for the book that comes out next week this morning. So now I can read something. What do you like to read?
I love reading. I will read your book the next.
You're going to read mine next?
Yeah,
That would be great.
yeah.
That would be great. Please leave a review if you like. You don't even have to like it. Just leave a review. Apparently, I need so many reviews for the algorithm to pay attention. Okay. Oh, are you okay?
Yeah, yeah. Still Diwali is going on here.
Sorry?
Still Diwali festival is
Oh, of course. You got
celebrating.
fireworks?
Yeah, people are doing that. That is the sound that you hear just now.
That's cool. Fireworks are illegal here. We haven't had fireworks since I was a child. I think they're wonderful, except for the ones, everyone sees on the harbour. They're not. They might not even do that this year. They don't want
Yeah.
people crowding around the fireworks. I heard a rumor that they're going to let the health workers go to the fireworks, and everyone else has to stay home. I think that's fair. I'm good with it. They have a hard job right now.
So you studied about England history and United States of America's history, right? So what is the difference that you are observing uh, today's uh, uh, England and today's United States and before uh, years, like hundreds of years before? What is the difference?
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, just the perspective of the um, America when America seceded from the Commonwealth and it became an independent nation, they call it the War of Independence, which is fair enough because it was their fight for independence from the British Crown. The British call it the Revolutionary War, and that sums it up. The difference in perspective, it's the same war. It just depends which side you're on, as to whose perspective you're going to use when you tell the story. So to the British, this was a colony that they'd set up and funded, turning around and saying, nope, we're done with you. We want to be on our own and run our own show. And to the Americans, it was like they want to keep us beholden to a land and a nation that's thousands of miles away, telling us what to do and what we can, and taxing the hell out of us. And we don't want any of that. want to run our own country. The difference in perspective is stark, very, very stark. So for one group of people, they're trying to take charge of their world, and the other group of people, they're losing power. So history is all about power struggles, I think. And I think that that kind of power struggle is always going to be a background to individual people just trying to get through their lives. I mean, yes, the world events that sit behind almost every moment, they're huge, but at the end of the day, you've still got, we've got a global pandemic, and people are still falling in love and out of love. They're still getting married. They're still having children. They're still having funerals. They're still got, learning, growing, changing, loving each other, hating each other, fighting with each other. On an individual level, people are always going to be just living their lives. The rest of it, the backdrop, that's just like music behind you. It's all amazing, world-changing stuff, but at the end of the day, it's not people, just world. I think if you hone in on individual people and their moments, you'll see that individual people are beautiful. Humanity as a whole is not particularly attractive, I don't think. En masse, we're not great. We do terrible things to each other. You can try in large groups, armies, navies, all of that. But one-on-one, most people are amazing. And that's where you get people falling in love. People don't fall in love in groups. They fall in love face-to-face, one-on-one. So I think it's been a hard year for a lot of people to remember that they're not alone because they haven't been able to have those moments. In terms of what I've seen in difference between America and England, I think there's a very big difference in the way the different countries view the world. I do think England still has, it's odd because I live in Australia, and Australia is still part of the Commonwealth. Our head of state is still officially the Queen, and England still looks at us like in a very paternal way, which frankly I find rather irritating, but we deserve it because we haven't asserted our independence and we haven't stepped away from them yet. Whereas I think America would find that England's opinion of them would be like a kid sticking its tongue out at their parent going, come over you, which is fair enough. But I don't know. I love the whole point of romance as a genre is that you romanticize the whole world you're describing. There's no doubt that Regency England wasn't all beer and skittles for most people. If you were a chambermaid or a butler or a scullery maid or a stable boy, it was probably not a very nice world to live in. But if you were a duke or army major or in his red coat who had lots of girls giggling at him every time he turned around in his uniform, it was probably fabulous. You didn't have to do any of your own gardening or anything like that. Something to be said. And that's the world I describe, and I'm well aware that that's not the world most people lived in. But that's the same as today. We don't all live in Hollywood-like lives, but we like to look at those and go, gee, that's nuts. I think we make a mistake, though, when we confuse that with reality. Reality is not romantic. You don't agree? You think it is?
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you.
Reality isn't romantic, but that's why people read to get away. Or write. I write to get away. Same thing.
So, what is the difference that you see in all these continents, Asia, Australia, and other continents?
I think there's a great deal of difference. Asia's a multifaceted continent. There's lots of different cultures and countries there. Australia is one country. Sometimes I wonder how, because there's always infighting between our states. We've only got 7, not like America's got. But how do I see it? I think it's a shame that there's so much division. Um, I see people saying, "You're my tribe. Come join your tribe. Find your tribe." I don't know. I'm not sure tribe's so great. I think can we not evolve past that now? We don't we don't we don't live in a world where that's necessary anymore. But the human desire to belong is very powerful. But where you have a way to belong, you also have a way to exclude. And I think people feel that flip side a lot more than they feel included. I think that's where a lot of people's pain comes from, and from that pain comes a lot of negative stuff. So, and I don't think that is any different. I don't think it's any different which country you live in. There's always going to be basic, correct way of fitting in, and whether or not you do or don't, and that's not going to be different. Human beings are very similar creatures, generally speaking, especially when they group up. So, Australia might not be America, and it might not be England, and it might not be India. But generally speaking, all the same undercurrents are always going to be there, just to varying degrees and exposed in varying ways. But I don't think people are that different. We're far more similar than we are different.
So all the people who wrote about historical books in different time periods before, maybe hundreds of years before, what we are studying today about different countries, is that true, or is that just a perception of a particular author?
I wouldn't say it's untrue. I would say it's a very specific perspective that's been given a lot of room to be taken as the only way to look at it. I would say that there's more perspectives and there's more points of view that could be looked at. Jane Austen didn't ignore the fact that there were Romani living in England. She mentions them in one of her books. She doesn't do it in a very positive way, and she does it in a very dismissive way that was very typical of how Gypsy people were viewed in England at the time. It doesn't mean that that is the only way to look at it. It's just the one everyone's been reading for 200 years. You know, so how might they actually have lived in this land? And obviously they did. They were there. There are loads of records to show that Romani people have been resident in England since the 1500s. But they didn't live the same way as the traditional English. So they got left out of a lot of stories. And the term marginalised, which I find very interesting, I think it's almost insulting to say someone is from a marginalised group, because what you're basically saying is your group has never had space. They've never had narrative space. They've never had room. They've never had front page to tell the story. And that's true. So, it's a bit like saying you're not quite visible. And I think, in a way, while that's accurate, I think that's a hard way. It's a hard thing to describe to people, because generally speaking, people living in and among their world are very visible to themselves. And most people don't stop and think how that looks to someone from the outside. And I personally feel like I'm always on the outside looking in. But not everyone's like that. Most people are on the inside and they don't stop and think, hey, not everyone is like me. But I think it's important to remember that no one's like anyone. And yet we're all people.
So while doing research, you'll be reading a lot of books
Yes,
who written by a lot of authors from different parts of the world, for sure.
yes.
So
I do that. I do a lot of that.
yeah, when you're collecting all these perspectives of the authors, Do you put your own perspective on that by collecting everybody's perspective and putting your perspective and mixing it and
Yes.
writing yours?
Yes. And then I formulate that into my heroes and heroines' perspective. And I keep it with them. I go, okay, well, this is something she'd notice. This is something he'd notice. This is something she probably wouldn't pay attention to. This is something he might find interesting. For example, if an Englishman went into her world, which he does, he's going to look around and see things that she wouldn't even blink at. So she doesn't stop and examine everything because she lives there. Just like if you come home, you go into your home, you know where everything is, you move through your house, and that's fine. But someone who comes into your house and has never been there before is like, oh, that's a nice picture, and you're like, oh, okay, and you kind of forgot it was there. When people live their lives, they don't stop and examine every inch of it. And I think the whole point about cultures meeting and mixing is that perspectives widen. They have to. And some people resist that, some people embrace that, and some people just let it happen. I think part of the world is what's going on, but most of it, almost all of it, is how we respond to that. And that's where the drama is, that's where the story is. It's in the responses, not in the actual happening. Um, you know, the pandemic is a huge event that's affected the whole world, but everyone's response to that is slightly different. You know, some people have gone, awesome, we get to play board games. Some people have gone, oh my God, I'll never leave my house again. And other people have gone, I'm going to get fit. And some people actually have gotten fit, and some people have just said they're going to get, everyone's reaction has been completely different. But we're all in it, and we're all dealing with it in a way. And years from now, someone's going to write about this, and they'll probably romanticize it. The year is 2020. There's a global pandemic. The only person who can save us is, or something like that. But it will become a story. It will become a story, and eventually a legend, and then a myth, and it will just become another thing that happened a long time ago. And they're going to zero in on on specific people and how they responded. Everything becomes a story eventually.
So at last, do you have anything to say to the world who watches this video?
Um, I love to hear from people who have read my book, and even if they want to tell me that they hated it, I'd love to know why, so I can learn and be better. So they can find me on social media. Clyve Rose is on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. I'm very big on Twitter. I am very quick at responding. And I have my own website as well, clyverose.com. Clyve is CLYVEROSE.com. And they can sign up for my newsletter, and they can find out about my new release, The Christmas Salon, which comes out on November 19. And that's pretty much my Christmas read for everyone, because I was asked to do a Christmas story with some of the same characters from this one. So there's a lot of characters in those stories, and there's a lot of stories that came out of there. I've already been asked if other characters are going to get more books, and they are. Everyone's going to get a happy ending except the bad guy, who doesn't deserve it because he's bad. What would I like to say? Yeah, get in touch. Talk to me. Tell me what you want me to write about, because I actually have 2 contracts for next year, and I don't know what I'm going to write about yet. So if there's a couple of Regency stories you wish you'd read about, send me a message and I'll see what I can do, because I've got 2 to write and I haven't actually plotted them out yet. Got no idea what I'm going to write about.
So, have you seen any previous videos of mine on YouTube?
I have. I went and had a look. You have quite the following. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Have you been doing it? You've been doing it for a few years, a couple of years.
No, just 3 to 4 months before I started it. No,
Wow. And you enjoy it?
I wanted to do videos with all the authors from different parts of the world.
Oh, okay. Well, this one's from Sydney, Australia.
Yeah.
in the middle of my night, which is fine because I'm not going to sleep. It's so stinking hot. How hot does it get where you are? What's the hottest it gets there?
Hot, 40.
40?
Yeah.
It got to 38 today, and it's not even summer yet. We get 40 here.
Okay. So 28, you're saying that it is too hot, but
It cooled down to 28. It was 38 earlier. At midday, it was 38,
okay.
and it's not yet summer.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to a very hot summer.
Okay.
I
So
don't have air conditioning, so I just sweat.
okay. So so
Is there
everything
anything
is
else you wanted to ask?
everything from your side is good.
Yes, yes. We're doing quite well with uh, COVID and everything. Australia's done fairly well. I mean, we're lucky because we have no land borders, so there's that. And we actually don't have a very big population, generally speaking. There's only 25 million people in our whole country. So there's that. Plus, we have a fairly decent national health system. And I never thought I would be great I never thought I would say this, but thank God for our civil service just this year. I'm not a fan, generally speaking, of government bureaucracy, but there's no doubt that they've done an amazing job in coordinating and organising and getting things happening here so that we're as safe as possible for as long as possible. So we've done okay. And Australia is a pretty good place to live, which is probably why it's so expensive to live here. But we have beaches and beautiful weather and most of the time. And we have some of the cutest animals in the world, I think. And yeah, I feel very lucky to be here and very lucky to be doing something I love.
So can I put this video on my YouTube channel and social media and on internet with your permission?
Yes. Shoot me a link as well, and I'll boost it on Twitter and Instagram as well.
Yeah, sure. So do you have anything to say to the world which you
Anything to
have
say
not
to the
said
world?
through your books?
Apart from please read my book. Um, um, remember that love is stronger than you think it is. Very powerful force. Don't underestimate it. I believe in love.
So always be like princess. Like
Are you laughing at me? Do you not believe in love?
no, I respect love. I agree with you completely. And I am smiling because it is the smile is acceptance of your statement.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I do believe in love. I believe it's the most powerful force in the universe. I do. I think there's a lot of rubbish around it, but love itself, hugely powerful, very cool. And I would like to see us trust it more. We do. I think it'd be a better world if people trusted love more and selfies less. That's my message to the world. More love, less selfies.
Nice. Always princess. Always be like princess in Australia, Sydney.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you so much again for accepting my request and accepting to talk with me and spending your valuable time.
My pleasure. Anytime. You have a wonderful. Is it day? It's afternoon. It's coming into evening. Yes.
Yeah, it's evening,
So you
5:36 p.m.
have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.